From KUNC and the NPR network, this is In The NoCo. I'm Erin O'Toole. $10.3 million. That's how much the CU-Anschutz medical campus agreed to pay recently to settle a lawsuit over vaccine mandates during the pandemic. A group of 18 students and faculty claimed that the school violated their religious liberties by requiring them to receive COVID vaccinations to be on campus in person. CU ultimately settled the case through mediation. The Thomas More Society, which specializes in religious liberty cases, represented the students and staff. The organization says this is one of the only cases in the country so far in which a defendant paid out money in a lawsuit over COVID vaccinations. So, why did CU settle? And what does the case say about vaccination policies in Colorado going forward? Joining me now is John Ingold, who covers public health and wrote about this settlement for the Colorado Sun.
So this is going back not that long ago, but it feels like ancient history by this point. But this is like the second year, really, of the COVID pandemic. So vaccines have become widely available, but we're starting to see these new variants that are popping up of COVID. We're talking summer 2021. It's the Delta variant. If you can remember back then, it created a surge of cases, hospitalizations, a surge of deaths in Colorado. And it was still a moment where the state and institutions felt like we really need to get a handle on this. And what ended up happening is you saw a number of vaccine mandates being issued. The state issued one for hospitals, nursing homes in general. And then you saw individual hospitals, or in this case, the CU-Anschutz medical campus, which is home to the University of Colorado School of Medicine and other schools. So students, faculty who are doctors, who are also practicing out in the community, and medical students who are also going and working at hospitals as well. Mm-hmm. And they adopted a vaccination mandate that was fairly similar to what everybody else had done. Mm-hmm. And it contained the potential for exemptions based on your health status if you potentially were going to be allergic to the vaccine. And it also contained at least the possibility, or the stated possibility, that you could be exempted for religious reasons.
So this was fairly typical of what other institutions were requiring, or organizations. And you touched on this, but at the height of vaccine mandates, some people asked for health exemptions if they had conditions like compromised immune systems, for example. The case at Anschutz involved religious objections to COVID vaccines by several students and faculty. What religious liberties was CU-Anschutz accused of violating here?
Yeah, so the religious objections were not all the same. So different plaintiffs brought their own different religious objections to it. There were folks who had oppositions to abortion and some issues that they felt like were implicated with vaccination there. There were some people who said they had a religious objection to vaccination generally. There were people who were Christian. There was at least one plaintiff I'm aware of who was Buddhist. But the argument that they made is that CU denied their exemptions because CU was sort of trying to interpret their religious beliefs. They were trying to test the sincerity of them. The plaintiffs argued that that is unconstitutional to do, and ultimately an appeals court agreed with them.
Let's talk about the settlement. I was really struck by this quote from CU-Anschutz about its vaccine mandates. The school said their vaccine mandate, quote, was grounded in science, public health guidance, and our obligation to safeguard lives during an unprecedented global crisis. While some chose to challenge the policy, the evidence remains clear. Vaccination was essential to protecting the vulnerable, keeping hospitals open, and sustaining education and research, end quote. John, if the school stands by its policy, why did it settle?
Yeah, this is a great question. So the first thing to note about the settlement is that it was not released. It's not contained in court files. I asked CU if they would share it, and they did not. The Thomas More Society, who actually did the announcement about the settlement, did not provide the settlement agreement. So it's difficult to know exactly what their reasoning is for it. I think in most cases, when there's a settlement, it's to end a case that could end up being worse off for you. And certainly the 10th Circuit Court of Appeals, as I mentioned before, found against CU in this case and pretty strongly against CU, noted religious animus motivating some of these decisions. It was what the 10th Circuit decided. And so that would not bode well for the case going down the road. So you could understand that maybe CU thought that it was better to settle and keep from creating more case law than to have to pay out these amounts that they're paying out here.
You mentioned that the 10th Circuit Court of Appeals mentioned religious animus against several of the plaintiffs, some of whom lost their jobs when their request for religious exemptions were denied.
That's right.
Have those employees gotten their jobs back as part of the settlement?
Another excellent question, and another thing I don't know. Again, not seeing the settlement, you just can't quite tell what's happening here. The settlement contains money for damages. It contains money for what was described as tuition, and it contained money for attorney's fees for the Thomas More Society. Right. So I think it's maybe reasonable to think that people aren't getting their jobs back or going back to work, but I can't say for certain.
Well, lastly, John, you cover public health, including measles outbreaks in Colorado, which are more common this year than they have been for 3 decades. That's a byproduct of fewer people getting the measles vaccine. What do you think this case says about the American public's attitudes about vaccinations?
Well, I think it shows how deeply divided the interpretations are of how to go about requiring vaccines and emphasizing the importance of vaccines. I've mentioned the 10th Circuit decision several times. I haven't mentioned the district court decision several times, which on multiple occasions the district court actually found against the plaintiffs in this case, denying their injunction requests, found that in the district court's interpretation, found that the policies were neutral as applied, that they did not contain religious animus, that they were fair in their interpretations. And then you get to the 10th Circuit and they find like the completely different thing. And so right. I think it really shows the way in which, at least from a legal perspective, and in still thinking about kind of the after effects outcome of the pandemic and how we would respond to something like this in the future, I think it just shows the deep divisions that still exist on what are the appropriate policies to adopt.
John Ingold is a reporter for the Colorado Sun. He mentioned that CU-Anschutz, like a lot of employers and institutions, no longer has a COVID vaccine requirement. School leaders removed that policy as the pandemic subsided. We'll put a link to John's story in our show notes and at KUNC.org. By the way, are you subscribed to the In The NoCo newsletter? A few times a week, KUNC News sends you a roundup of the news you need to know here in Colorado. It's a quick, convenient way to stay up to date on what's happening in your community. Head to KUNC.org and click on the newsletter link to subscribe. That's it today for In The NoCo. I'm Erin O'Toole. Thanks so much for listening.